Almost 2 years ago, we saw the launch of Security Breach, one of the most anticipated FNAF games to release in a while, developed by Steel Studios, and let's just say the pressure was on. The game had seen multiple delays during its development, and when it finally launched in December 2021, the response to the game was quite mixed to say the least. However, that's a tale for another day. The game had seen multiple updates after it was released, and eventually, we saw the first ever teaser for the Ruin DLC in May 2022, with the release of sometime in 2023, and that it would be free, which obviously came as a shock to everybody. Which brings us to today. The Security Breach Ruin DLC is officially out, and while I think it's safe to say that the DLC literally and figuratively saved Security Breach, this expansion to the game proved many things, one major thing being that Steel will listen to criticism, but also that they were more than capable of making a good horror experience. Since this DLC could be counted as a sort of conclusion to the Pixel story, let's go ahead and cover some cool lore first that was scattered in the DLC, because for the first time in a while, this game actually managed to make me invested in the story again.
Chapter 1. The Story.
The story of the Ruin DLC was actually surprisingly really easy to follow and understand, but obviously anything I mention here is mainly just speculation and theories. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt. The DLC takes place sometime after the events of Security Breach, following the ending of Princess Quest 3, where Gregory, Freddy, and Vanessa leave the location happily. After some time, they decided to return to the Pizzaplex to trap a character known as the Mimic in the sinkhole in Roxy Raceway, due to how extremely dangerous it is. They found a way to do this by developing a program called the Mexis, which keeps the door shut by using nodes, but that was also cemented to keep the Mimic from ever escaping again. Gregory had drawn various drawings that looked like the endings from Security Breach, implying that they were made up endings that never happened, which brings us into the present. We play as a kid named Cassie who was called to the ruined Pizzaplex by Gregory, who is nowhere to be seen. Cassie decides to further travel into the Pizzaplex, eventually running into a Roxy talkie, which Gregory's voice could be heard calling for help, and of course being the reason why you're there in the first place, she agreed to help Gregory, who was trapped in the sinkhole under Roxy Raceway. Cassie would run into various scares, one being from Chica as she continues to make her way through the different areas of the ruined Pizzaplex, which have been destroyed and filled with garbage all over the place. She would eventually find the game's main gameplay gimmick, the Fast Wrench, and after some time, Cassie runs into a ruined Monty who causes her to fall into water as she sinks to her possible demise. But of course that doesn't happen. Duh. Cassie finds herself in what is left of Monty Gator Golf, where she continues to push forward, and is also the place where she'll find herself with the Vanny mask from Help Wanted. Putting it on starts a pairing process which connects her to the neural network, or more specifically, Vanny, the virtual augmented neural network integration mask, where Cassie will meet Helpy, the MIDI companion of the game, who may or may not be who they truly seem. The Vanny network allows for Cassie to see and go through objects that were originally obstructing her path previously, which can only be interacted with while the mask is on. The mask is basically the only thing that is actively protecting you and also putting you in extreme danger at all time. And this was shown through the Mexis, who is the main antagonist of the DLC. As Cassie progresses, Gregory will reference disabling security nodes that are scattered throughout the various locations Cassie will visit but must be disabled in order to save Gregory, and of course Cassie listens, but obviously it's never that simple. The Mexis is what stands in her way as she tries to disable them, calling the different animatronics to her in order to stop her. Cassie in the story is basically unknowingly helping the actual antagonist, as she isn't aware of who she's truly helping, and it is heavily implied to her that the Mexis is the true villain and is trying to stop her from helping Gregory. So of course Cassie willingly listens to Gregory and starts to travel deeper and deeper into the Pizzaplex, disabling all the nodes that the real Gregory and Vanessa set up. Cassie eventually meets with Roxy, who is stuck with the hatred and grief caused by Gregory after all this time, and even confusing Cassie and Gregory because she obviously can't see her. But the sound of Cassie's voice was enough to recognize Cassie for her to back away, causing her to glitch. So something had to have happened, and what specifically, I don't know. Moving into Phaser Blast, we see Cassie slide down a tunnel with multiple prompts floating, while a glitch caught in the loop song played, and we eventually run into the Mexis who waited at the end of it. We get teleported into Vanny's room where we see a lantern on top of the arcade. However, if you put on the Vanny mask, we can see a sword stabbed directly into it. Whatever was in it is now free. After some time of disabling nodes and Phaser Blast, we run into the body of Glamrock Freddy with the tag of Prototype with his head missing, which should sound familiar. But we are forced to run away and escape Freddy. Cassie after some time runs into Roxy, who is pinned under a forklift, saying she remembered her from her special day, and saying her birthday along with her favorite type of cake, carrot cake, saying "You're number one" twice. She asked if she had reserved her birthday yet and asked about her friends, but Cassie had the Faz wrench in hand, putting it into Roxy's eyes, resetting her and disabling her. I'll be honest, even I got a bit emotional from this. Cassie is left crying as she goes into the elevator in the sinkhole, going down into the remains of Freddy Fazbear's pizza place. She goes through a hole that was next to the giant Freddy head and finds herself in one of the most beautiful locations in a FNAF game, with fast coins scattered around the place. Going deeper into the ruins, Cassie finds Candy Cadet, who had one more story in him, which using the fast coins found lets him tell it. The story tells a tale about a mother and a son who lived in the woods, where the mother would catch a monster who lurked in the woods and locked it in the basement. The mother had sang the boy a lullaby in order to keep him from being terrified of the creature making sounds in the basement, but the monster eventually learned the lullaby, learned the child to opening the door while the mother was gone one day. The implications of the story can mean many things. It could be a retelling of Ruin or another story about Vanessa or Gregory, but what is for sure most likely true is that the monster in the tale is the Mimic. Cassie goes further down and finds the burn trap boss room, where she has to open a door with her Faz wrench once more. Opening it and again going more down, finds the Mexis system. Disabling it traps the Mexis in the system, opening the door that blocked the cement, which conveniently had a forklift that could break down the cement. Cassie activates the forklift, causing it to ram directly into the wall, opening the room with Gregory in it. Turns out it wasn't Gregory. This is actually the Mimic, a character who was introduced in the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories and epilogues, and is also theorized to be Glitch Trap and Burn Trap, but what is for sure known is that the Mimic's kill count is quite insane. Roxy saves Cassie just in time, telling her to run away, where she gets in contact with the real Gregory, guiding her to the exit. The Mimic pushes the forklift away and begins chasing Cassie, eventually reaching the elevator, where she is forced to do one more puzzle and gets into the elevator, cutting off the Mimic's arm in the process, where we hear one last speech from Gregory, basically saying that he had to drop the elevator so that the Mimic won't follow them, and that they built the Mexis system to keep it contained. He cuts the wires and Cassie falls to her possible demise. What truly happened is unknown. The story for the most part was extremely easy to follow, but in reality, if you had followed the Tales stories up until now, you probably got the most enjoyment out of the Mimic appearing in this game. However, with the introduction of the Mimic officially roaming about now in the games, and not just in the books, this opens up the realm for many things, and I'm really excited for where the story goes from here.
Chapter 2. The gameplay and characters.
Comparing both Security Breach and Ruin together, these are completely different games mechanic-wise, besides for like a couple elements. Security Breach followed this sort of open world type beat where you can go wherever you want at whatever time, collecting security passes, which open up more areas for you to explore, but obviously because of the open world format that the Pizzaplex had, felt extremely empty. But the way it tried to combat this was by having collectibles in duffel bags that had lore stashed inside them, which didn't help fill the void that much. Although in Ruin, they completely cut out the open world aspect and decided to go in a super linear route for this game, which is point A to point B with the ability to sidetrack sometimes to collect items, which actually helped the game a lot in the end. But everything was pretty straightforward and actually made for a tense gameplay experience, where you actually have nowhere to run or hide. The implementation of the Vanny Mask, rework of the camera system, and the Faz Wrench helped make the DLC a great experience with this gameplay. So let's go ahead and start off with the Vanny Mask, or also known as Vanny. You get this after the Faz Wrench when you encounter Maskbot in Monty Golf. The mask takes you to this AR flipside type world where you're able to walk through objects that you originally weren't able to without the mask, but also gives you access to disabling the security nodes scattered around the area. However, in order to make the flipside actually have a threat, the Mexis can only be encountered in it. Although it isn't capable of killing you directly, it can call enemies to you. Also, if you stand close to it for a little too long, it instantly kills you. Sometimes you are forced to rely on the mask because some aspects that are locked, such as the camera systems, can be specifically in the flipside world, which is also where you're at most risk in the game. These robots can't see you, however the Mexis can guide them to you, so being cautious is heavily recommended. Moving on to the Faz Wrench. The Faz Wrench is given to the player first and introduces what it can do by locking a door with a puzzle, where you have to switch between different inputs and fill them up until they are all matched together at the same time, while also slowly decreasing at the same time as well. These puzzles get harder and harder as you progress through the game, which adds more of a challenge to them instead of just doing the same easy puzzle and over again. Which brings me to the security nodes. The security nodes can only be disabled with the Faz Wrench, which opens up a new puzzle section where you need to match an icon with the same exact icon. But like the other puzzles, it gets increasingly difficult as you progress further into the game. You'll figure out the puzzle patterns over time, but going through them for the first time is actually quite difficult. And finally, the camera system. You no longer have the cameras just on your watch. They're now exclusively to specific locations of the area. They have the ability to lure robots away from you, and also are used to do another type of puzzle, which is finding anomalies in the order given to you in order to progress forward. Ruin manages to perfectly mix each of these elements together to make a great tense horror experience, manages to make the gameplay loop actually fun. And also on top of that, the game was actually not that buggy. I think. Moving on to the characters. Obviously the cast is actually pretty small this time. Cassie, Roxy, Gregory, the Mimic, Mexis, Glamrock Bonnie, and Helpy are the only ones we see some progression with, / conclusions to their stories. Let's start with Cassie first. Cassie is our new protagonist in this DLC, who's a friend of Gregory, who ended up getting called to the Pizzaplex by the Mimic. Cassie and Gregory's friendship is shown specifically in the Roxy Salon section, where cutouts of both Roxy and Cassie start to appear, telling a small little story. Cassie was having a party at the Pizzaplex where Roxy would do her best to try and make it special in a way, using what we heard before decommissioning her. None of Cassie's friends showed up to her party, leaving her all alone, crying, until Gregory had shown up. Using what we know so far, they probably became good friends, because otherwise there was no reason for Cassie to visit the Pizzaplex again. Cassie, like the player, otherwise is mainly just completely left in the dark about what is happening throughout all of Ruin, besides for a few clues that is given throughout the game, but also gives us clues to other characters such as Cassie's father, who's apparently a Fazbear technician. The real Gregory, although didn't get much character development, had tried his absolute best to get in contact with Cassie before it was too late, but obviously failed into the end of the game during the Mimic chase. Gregory guided Cassie to an elevator just to thank her for trying to help him, but unfortunately had no other choice but to cut the elevator in order to not risk the Mimic escaping, betraying Cassie in the end. The Mimic in Mexis is basically just evil versus good, evil being the Mimic and good being Mexis. The Mexis security program was developed by Vanessa and Gregory in order to keep the Mimic contained, so obviously it was doing what it was told to do from the start, and tried its best to counter the Mimic and Cassie, but unfortunately wasn't able to in the end, which leads us to the Mimic. The Mimic in Ruin is basically everything it was said to be in the stories. It can mimic, it wears costumes, etc. It's a rogue endoskeleton that is basically doing what it was told, and is learning as well in the process. What actually happens to it at the end is unknown as well. Glamrock Bonnie, although had no major role at all, I just wanted to cover him anyways. Glamrock Bonnie's remains could be found by disabling the caution sign bots that were scattered all over the game, and once you deactivated all of them, a door would open up that would lead to Glamrock Bonnie's destroyed body, whose eyes were still lit up. Disabling the last 4 signs would cause his eyes to turn off, finishing him off for good. This has caused a lot of discussion over who the real killer was, and honestly I've got no clue anymore. Oh, and there's also this poster of Glamrock Freddy in Glamrock Bonnie's room. I wonder what that could mean. And finally, moving on to Helpy. It's Helpy, but also not Helpy. This version of Helpy is exclusive to the Vanny mask, where he only starts to appear once you get injected with a neural network. He has a good side and a bad side, and it's theorized that the evil Helpy side is the Mimic. And with that is every single character who got at least some sort of characterization in Ruin. The thing with Cassie's father probably will get brought up again in Help 1 or 2 from the looks of it, but also at the same time, everything that has been theorized so far everywhere recently is certain FNAF world elements might actually be slowly coming back, and honestly, I'm here for it regardless of what it is. I just hope we get to see more Cassie and also what Gregory, Freddy, and Vanessa were up to this entire time in a future entry. Apparently the text regarding Carnival was found in the files, so honestly, who knows.
Chapter 3 Endings.
Now at last, we can cover the endings. Honestly, no one's sure what ending is actually canon, just like what happened with Security Breach. However, there's only 3 endings this time. So I'll go from least likely to most likely depending on certain elements of the different endings. So let's start with the Brazil ending. The Brazil ending is the only ending that requires the Vanny mask to get this ending during the Mimic chase, which finds Cassie in this fictional scenario where Gregory is safe and sound with Vanessa in the background. The environment is similar to that of certain endings from Security Breach, however, this is obviously the worst ending you can get as Cassie gets trapped, which makes it unlikely that this is the canon ending. Next up, the Scooper ending. Now obviously past this point, these next 2 endings are the ones that are heavily debated on being canon, and it's completely understandable why. The Scooper ending can only be achieved if you zoom out of the cameras in certain chapters and find secret cameras that are hidden outside of view. Once you get them all, a hallway opens at the end of the Mimic chase and the elevator ending gets blocked off. Cassie presses a red button triggering a Scooper to pick up the Mimic and finish him off. However, if you look closely, the suit looks empty. This ending introduces the Mimic with a costume instead of without one, which is what the Mimic is known to do as told in the books to hunt his victims. This ending ends off on a sudden note after Mimic is scooped, with nothing unlike the elevator ending. Now finally, the elevator ending. This ending can be achieved if the player decides to listen to Gregory during the chase, ending in a final climatic tense puzzle section before being able to get into the elevator, successfully escaping the Mimic. Of course, since Cassie was the one who ended up freeing the Mimic, Gregory decided it was best to just drop the elevator to not risk it following them. Cassie falls to her possible demise, cutting to black as the elevator hits the ground. Sticking around to the end of the credits, we can hear Roxy call out to Cassie. The elevator ending out of the 3 endings is the only one that ends off with something. However, even with that, it's completely uncertain what the story will pick up from at this time, like usual.
Chapter 4 Final Thoughts.
We are now possibly leaving the Pizzaplex era of Five Nights at Freddy's after 4 years, and I think this was the best way for them to conclude it. Ruined was basically everything I had wanted from this DLC, like everyone else in the community probably, and for the first time in years, I felt genuine fear, like not tense moments, but I mean like actual fear from a Five Nights at Freddy's game. Given everything we got from the game, I actually feel like we know more about certain characters than we originally did, and I think that helped make the Roxy moment actually hit since we saw everything in the salon, but also her dialogue. They managed to build the characters up one last time probably, and in the end, I stayed up all night playing through Ruin the day it launched, and I was extremely tired, but I'll be honest, I left extremely happy, and I'm ready for whatever Stu is making next. Carnival FNAF game or not, after Help Wanted 2, I think it'll be great. Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. This video is actually a sequel to my first video ever, which is unlisted now, but you can still watch it if you check out the playlist. Otherwise, I hope everyone enjoyed playing through Ruin as much as I did, and I'm currently working on a new FNAF video right now, so stay tuned for that, and yeah, until next time, goodbye, thank you for watching, bye bye.